Welcome back to Weekend Prime. I'm Robinson Okenye. Now, on this week's episode of Face the Facts, our reporter Herman Kamariki investigates the painful reality inside Kenya's public schools, where classrooms are overcrowded, teachers overwhelmed, and institutions meant to shape the future are struggling to survive on impossible budgets. As billions continue flowing into politics, events, and public relations, one question remains: has Kenya abandoned its classrooms while funding appearances? Take a look.
Welcome to Face the Facts. There is a saying that says, a nation is judged not by the speeches of its leaders, but by the classrooms of its children. And today we must confront an uncomfortable truth about the state of education in this country. Now, if you have a child in grade 1 to grade 6 in a public primary school in this country, then this story is for you. While we are told that education is the foundation of this country, the numbers tell a different story. A public primary school child in Kenya is allocated 188 Kenya shillings per term. 188, that's what I mean. And you know, these ones should run their education for 14 weeks. This is from the government. 188 shillings, Kenyans. That is not just a figure. It is a statement of priorities. From this amount, let's do some mathematics here. Schools are expected to cater for textbooks, exercise books, stationery, teachers' guides, support staff wages, maintenance, sanitation, transport, electricity, science and technology, and examinations. But when you break it down, what remains is not support, it is survival. Now let's do some mathematics here. A school with 200 learners, for example, will receive about 4,000 Kenya shillings per term. That is not per learner, but the whole school, because the government has allocated 20 Kenya shillings for every student, or rather every pupil in primary school. That is to pay the workers. You know, this one should cater for cooks, watchmen, cleaners, and other essential workers who keep schools running. We must ask ourselves honestly, what dignity exists in that arithmetic? Because if you can have 4,000 to pay all these learners, how much will you pay them? And the 4,000 is for 14 weeks, not for a month. We are expecting head teachers to run institutions on impossible budgets and still deliver excellence. That's a question. Yet the reality on the ground is painful. Primary school teachers are demoralized and stressed. You look at them in the villages and even in the cities. Some struggle with even clothing. Some struggle even to get a decent meal, and yet we expect them to be motivation behind the dreams of our children. That is a country that is sinking. How do you inspire children when you yourself are running on empty? We may need a national research on how many teachers are living in distress in this country, and I assure you, you will be shocked. And the results, I fear, would shock the whole nation, apart from the political class.
Kirinyaga hoye!
Then there is another contradiction here. We are told there is no money, but we see millions being spent on political gatherings. And even before we go there, let me tell you about 2 Kenya shillings. 2 Kenya shillings that has been allocated for science. So our kids, when we say we are heading to Singapore and we need to be a scientific nation, we allocate 2 shillings per term for every child who is at an innovation stage. Anyway, that aside, I talked about delegations and, of course, state events, and we say there are no money. The president hosts different teams at State House, and recently a delegation from Kirinyaga went to State House. You know, these are meetings that end with envelopes, and we can only speak about this even after teachers went to State House and they walked out with 10,000 each, translating to about 100 million Kenya shillings. And you see, millions are circulating in the name of engagement. We launched nationwide programs. For instance, the recently launched Nyota program, where they moved from counties with heavy logistics, vehicles, fuel, coordination, spending millions to distribute 20,000 or 22,000. So you have an event where you're spending over 5 million to give youth 22,000 and call it empowerment. We travel, we campaign, we organize, and we speak. But in our schools, children sit in overcrowded classrooms, taught by exhausted teachers, in institutions struggling to function? And what point did appearances become more important than classrooms in this country? And what point did politics become louder than education in this country, Kenya? Because leadership is not measured by how often it is seen, but what it quietly fixes. You know, there is a truth we must confront. A nation that can spend millions on political visibility but cannot adequately fund its classrooms is not lacking money, it is lacking balance. And so we return to the hard question. What future are we building if the people entrusted with shaping it are themselves neglected? If teachers are stressed, underpaid, and demoralized, head teachers are struggling to keep schools running, if schools are underfunded and overstretched, if children are learning an environment of scarcity, then we are not investing in education, we are merely managing its decline. And history, Kenya, will not judge us by the speeches we make. It will judge us by the classrooms we ignored. Because if you spend too much time explaining what you have done, then you have done nothing. And just to remind you, walk to your school and see what children are going through, and then compare with how our political class is moving around this country. My name is Herman Kamariki, but before I talk, or rather I give my greetings to the people of Kisii County, let me first of all apologize for the last Face the Facts we did on Friday. We used some pictures that depicted that Sony Sugar Company was part of the story that we did. And so we apologize to Sony Sugar Company and say that the story we ran had nothing to do with Sony Sugar Company. And sorry for that and the pictures we used during the last week's Face the Facts. My name is Herman Kamariki. Greetings to the people of Mwamosioma, that is Getari, Kisii County.